Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Rivera, and the video game I will be covering a bit on is the Pokemon video game franchise and how it has captured a bit of the sentiment felt around Japan. First, in order to get a better understanding of how Pokemon came to be, we need to look into the final decades of the 20th century. As it's been covered already, Japan had a tough challenge following the bursting of the economic bubble that caused what historians have called the lost decade. Kingston describes this as a time when the bubble economy and the hopes of becoming wealthier pushed people to purchase property and stocks to make a profit. But he adds, just as quick that as these valuations rose, they crashed in 1990 and left many in impossible financial situations. Because of how disastrous the bursting of the bubble was to both private citizens and businesses, the effects of the crash were felt by a lot of people in society. In the home life, divorce rates rose, children were being pulled from universities so that their families could save money from tuition expenses. And shockingly enough, many heads of households were committing suicide at alarming rates so that their families could benefit from life insurance policy payouts. So why does all this matter? These conditions strongly influenced Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokemon, in creating the video game. With everything going on in Japan, he noticed that there was a rupture in the relationships within the family. He saw parents were spending more time at work, some commuted long distances, keeping them away from their family, and that students also were under constant pressure to perform at their best in school and at home. And some people developed enclosed lifestyles that prevented them from interacting with others as much as they'd like, or if they wanted to at all. Tajiri recognized this rupture, and he wanted the kids growing up to be able to experience a bit of the thrill of discovery that he had growing up in rural Tokyo before the city became so urbanized. He wanted to provide a place where children could withdraw into and feel secure with their companions while going on an adventure. Economically and socially, these were some of the events going on in Japan during the time. But for video games, where does Pokemon come in? Video games date back to the 1970s. The first video game came out in 1971. The following year, Pong by Atari was released, and then Space Invaders became a huge hit in Japan in 1978. And caught up in the video game craze was Tahiri. He liked them so much that he started a magazine that included his own strategy guide, and then he also went on to learn how to design the video games. When Pokemon was released in 1996, it became a huge hit. Why it was a hit? It was an adventure role-playing game set in a fantasy world where monsters served as both friends and as capital that captured the attention of a large video game playing audience. Moreover, according to Masuyama, what made Pokemon so popular and unique was its feature that allowed players to trade creatures with other real-life players that they had to search and find in the real world. The main story behind the video game, it begins with a playable character going on a journey to become a great Pokemon trainer. To do so, the player has to nurture and strengthen his team by fighting and capturing a variety of monsters with their own special advantages and disadvantages. Once caught, the player has to train them by fighting other wild Pokemon or trainers that they might run into. And once the player completes the main storyline, they aren't finished with the game yet, but they do have the option of continuing with the game, exploring the world, and trying to complete the collection of Pokemon. And again, what made the game to stand out from its contemporaries, what made it such a global phenomenon that would see the franchise become one of the best-selling video game franchises in history, is the fact that Tahiri inserted a kind of clause that made it impossible for players to complete their collections without building relationships with other players. So if one truly wanted to feel the satisfaction of having completed the ultimate goal of the game, they had to leave their homes or wherever it was that they found themselves playing and find players that had the Pokemon they wanted and offer them something reasonable in exchange for that. Since the beginning of the century, the Pokemon Company has released game after game and always selling millions of games to an awaiting audience. Today, there's nearly 900 Pokemon, up substantially from the original 151 that began the century. And it's become so popular worldwide that not only have Pokemon games crossed over to different consoles like the Nintendo 64 and the Switch, but it's created a media empire that extends to an anime, trading card game, manga, toys, and several movies also. And most recently, in 2016, Pokemon made a massive leap when it released Pokemon Go. It's a game available to play on cell phones as an augmented reality type game. And in this new style of play, no longer are players restricted to the small world that the game developers provide, but the Pokemon now populate the real world as players travel around their cities and try to find the Pokemon that they're looking for. And in the same game, just as the handheld game for the Game Boy, you also fight and train your Pokemon with other people. So what does Pokemon tell us about Japanese society? First, the recession of the 1990s and its fallout are still evident today. Today, stock and urban land prices are still well below the level they were during the height of the bubble economy. And this means that many or some Japanese families still find it difficult to progress in life on account of the debts incurred in the years before, as well as the rising unemployment levels and the stagnating wages that no longer rise the longer a person remains at a company. It's only made life more difficult for many working class people. And because these financial difficulties are not contained and also affect family life, they have deteriorated the relationships within families and society as well. But as video games grew in popularity, they created places where people could gather, communicate, and also form friendships that would help them progress in their respective video games that they happen to be playing, and also enriching the social lives of those who played the game. With the handheld console version of the game, Tahiri's blueprint made it so that his players would have to go out of their way and make friends if they were to complete their video game. Also, his implementation of strategy guides must have helped create the communities of people who interact with each other, both in person and online, as a way to strategize and approach the game in a more efficient or even in a more challenging way. As for Pokemon Go, they have community days, and these are just huge events where different people that play the game that don't necessarily know each other can meet up and play together and work together to capture or participate in an event to get a rare Pokemon. And this is obviously reflecting the original idea of the game that players have to interact with others. So because there has been an interruption in relationships within Japanese society caused by the uncertainty stemming from the economic difficulties from the late 20th century, it's allowed the developers at Game Freak and the Pokemon Company to create a game that fosters interaction not only with the fantasy world, but also with those around the player that happens to play the game as well. Also, capitalism has also made its way into the Pokemon world, creating its own Pokemon economy. Masuyama writes that capitalism is a system of labor where people sell their work for a wage and the profits feed the beneficiaries of the labor being provided. The Pokemon economy could be seen as a system of labor where the worker doesn't necessarily work for a wage, but a type of gift exchange that benefits both parties involved. Another historian, Frederick Jameson, states that the more children play in the world of Pokemon, it recreates an He says, an internal addictive capitalism that hooks players with the thrill of acquiring new creatures that are added to one's collection. He notes that this frame of mind is very similar to the capitalism experienced by those who consume other name brand consumer goods. So in the Pokemon world, these creatures act as both currency, but also as friends to the player. In this way, the Pokemon video games brings together the idea of gift exchange as well as a more modern idea of capitalism. So consequently, during a time when Japan has worked tirelessly to rebuild the nation following the economic collapse that was fueled by a mass consumer market, Pokemon has ingrained certain aspects of capitalism that excite and satisfy some players as they further accumulate more capital through creatures. In video games, that is seen through the catching of different monsters, as well as the transaction carried out by players in order to acquire further wealth through exchanges with other Pokemon, with other people. In conclusion, through the game's openness that promotes communication, Pokemon has helped build both real-life communities while also introducing players into this Pokemon economy that parallels capitalism in its own way. And in times where Japan hopes to rebuild better, these efforts can be seen through video games. And right here is just a video of a Pikachu Day, one of the community building events.